Hi everybody, and welcome to our first virtual Art of Science. Today we're going to talk about fossils. Now, when you think about fossils, what do you think about? Normally, I think about this guy here, a dinosaur, right? But fossils don't look like this, right? Because he's got this big belly, he's got a squishy head, there's too much to him. Fossils generally look more like this, bony. But how did they get that way? Well, today we're going to try and make our own fossils. We're not going to use real dinosaurs because I haven't seen one around lately. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this pan that I've provided you with, and we're just going to use this really to keep our area clean. You don't need to have it. If you aren't doing this with a kit, but you don't need it, but I like it. So, and then you're going to need the Play-Doh. And I did provide little dinosaurs for you guys, but all fossils aren't dinosaurs. So if there's something else that you'd like to make a fossil, you can. So if you want to use a seashell or some type of a plant, you go for it. You could even do more than one. You could take your Play-Doh out and just use half of it. That's fine. There we go. So maybe you want to save this for something else. I don't know. But what you are going to want to do is you want to make this flat. As flat as you can. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. We want it to be able to cover the entire thing that we're making into a fossil. So that looks like it fits really well. So we're going to actually take this guy and lay him down in here. I know that most of you are going to want to just put him on top of the Play-Doh and push down, but we're not going to do that because it would actually make the impression of the dinosaur too deep, and then it will take much longer for our glue to dry, like a super long time. So let's not do that. We're going to take him, we're going to lay him down, and then we're going to take our Play-Doh and we are going to put it over him so that it's covering him and then just lightly press down. Again, don't press down too much because the impressions will be much too deep. There we go. So what we are doing in the art world is we're making a mold, right? So you guys have seen molds before. Cupcake tins, ice cube trays. Those are molds, okay? Because we are making a liquid take on a certain shape. In the art world, we use molds to make things like sculptures. So you make a mold of something, and it's usually made out of clay, but it can be made out of wax or something else that's malleable. Malleable means that I can manipulate it, I can change it. And then we make an impression in that thing that we're making. You can either do it like we're doing, make it flat, or sometimes they're three-dimensional, so you have to like carve out the inside and stuff. And then you very carefully, we're going to take him, you're going to take your fossil out. You're going to take your item out of your clay. And you should be left with an impression. Can you see that? It should look like what you push down into it. So this one's, his arm's a little deep, but I like it. It's fine. I don't mind waiting. So now we have our mold. This is our mold. So now we're going to make the cast. So in art, that usually means that we're going to take a liquid of some kind. So if you were using an ice cube tray, what do you put in an ice cube tray? You put water in it. All right, that is your liquid. We're not going to use water because water melts. Instead, we're going to use glue. And I know what you're thinking. Miss Shannon, if fossils are made of dinosaur bones, why are we using glue? Well, here's the thing. When a dinosaur dies, okay, their soft parts begin to rot. And when I say soft parts, I mean like their skin and the muscles and the organs and all that jazz. It begins to rot. And as that process is happening, sediment or little teeny tiny pieces of rock and dirt and debris and all that jazz cover it up, okay? So it covers him up. And even though he's covered up with the sediment, okay, he's still continuing to rot. So all of his flesh goes away, and what's left is the hard parts, like the bones and the teeth. And he's still covered with rock, though, okay, with sediment. But as time goes by, okay, the bones will also start to go away, and they'll be replaced with minerals. That's what's going to happen. But as that's happening, at the same time that that is happening, that all that decomposition is happening, more sediment is continuing to layer over and over and over again on top of our poor dead dinosaur here. So as that happens, the more sediment there is, the heavier it gets, the more weight that is being pushed down on top of this guy. So when sediment gets pushed down, the pressure causes sedimentary rock. And so that's what happens. Sedimentary rock forms around what was our dinosaur. So basically, that creates the mold, and then the sedimentary rock becomes the quote-unquote liquid is formed around it. All right? But we are going to use glue and a spoon. And you don't need a lot of glue. So just take a little bit in your spoon. And then what you're going to do is you're going to drip it over the impression. And you can spread it, just if you're going to spread it around, be gentle, because we don't want to mess up the mold. We don't want it to change the way it's supposed to look. So you can spread it around. You don't want to put too much in there, because if you put too much, again, it's going to take a super long time to dry. Put a little bit more in there. The really deep parts are going to take an extra long time to dry, which is why we don't want to try and make the impression too deep. There we go. Fabulous. Okay. And now, once you've done that, the hard part is you have to wait. Now, luckily, we don't have to wait as long as we would if it was a dinosaur, because those guys have been hanging out for thousands, if not millions, of years, just chilling. Hidden under the rock. But as it dries, it's going to look something like this. Now, I don't know how well you can see that, but right there is where it was a little too deep. I put a little too much glue, so it's still white, but for the most part, it's mostly clear. So once it's mostly clear, you can find the edge and then very gently start to pull it up. All right, and this was a seashell that I did actually. Oop. Okay, and because it's made of glue, it's going to be very faint for you guys, but I don't know how well you can see that. It's a shell, essentially. Now, it's still a little gooey in that main part, so I should have probably waited for that to dry longer. But I had done a dinosaur the other day. Now his rib cage is a little messed up because, again, I made it too deep. But once it's all dry and pulled out like this, you can then trim the side parts off if you want, and that is your fossil. You guys did a great job. You know, you can just continue to make them if you want to. There's lots of fun things that you can do casts of. I'd be really interested to see what creative things you do with these guys. But just remember that the deeper the impression, the longer it's going to take to dry. It's a waiting game. But luckily, while you're waiting for these to dry, I have another thing for us to make, which is going to be super exciting and will help us understand more about why it takes so long to make a fossil. Because we're going to make a giant timeline. So we're going to make a big timeline because when we're talking about fossils and geology in general, really, we have to think differently than we do right now because we think about how long glue takes to dry, and if it takes more than like 10-15 minutes, we're like, oh my God, it's taking too long. But in geologic time, taking too long goes to a whole new level, quite frankly. So to really truly understand fossils and dinosaurs and all that jazz, we have to change our way of thinking. And a way to do that is to make a big timeline. So to make our big timeline, you have instructions, and these instructions actually have the instructions for both things that we're doing. If you learn better from reading the directions, or if I'm saying something in a confusing way, just fact check me. It's a good idea to do. But you also have these fun strips of different colored paper. Now you should have 2 strips of each color. So what you are going to do is you're going to take these 2 strips and you're going to put some glue. I've provided a glue stick for you. You're going to put a glue down one edge, and then you're going to glue them together end to end, like that, okay? And you're going to do that with each color. You're going to glue them together end to end. And then once you're done all 5 colors, you're then going to take those 5 colors and you're going to glue them to each other end to end, okay? Until you have one really long strip of different colored paper. And the crazy part about that is each block of color that's this long is going to represent 1 billion years. I know. So once we have that one big long strip of colored paper that's all connected, glued together, you're going to want to lay it on the floor because it's going to be big. And then what you're going to do is you can either grab some crayons, markers, what have you, and you can draw your own representations, or I have printed out representations for each thing that we're going to have to do. So you're going to have to cut these out, and then you're going to glue them in very certain sections, okay? So on the very first block of color, starting from the left, you are going to draw or glue the earth in the middle where the 2 pieces meet. So if this was my first color on the left, I would put the earth right here in the middle, okay? So, you know what? Let me show you what it would look like. But I'm going to need some help because it really truly is a very big timeline. So we are going to make a really big timeline. But to show you what it looks like and where you're going to glue stuff, I need some help. So we're going to have this dinosaur help us out. So if you could unravel our timeline for me, please. So when you're gluing things or drawing things on your timeline, you can have it all on the floor. Okay? And you're going to start with the first color on the left. And for me, that was pink. And in the middle of pink, you're going to draw or glue a picture of the earth. And then you're going to go to the next color, and in the middle, where the 2 pieces meet, you are going to draw or glue the picture of a fossil. Now, the reason why they're putting them in these specific places is because this is when the Earth was born, about 4.5 billion years ago. And the very first fossil that we have found so far dated back 3.5 billion years ago. But it wasn't a dinosaur fossil. It was like plankton. It was a single-celled organism. But then we're going to skip the next 2 colors, and we're going to go all the way to the very last And the very last color, we're going to go to the middle, and that's where we're going to glue the picture of fish, and then the reptiles, and then the mammals, and then the dinosaurs, and then us, because we're all relatively new in the geologic timeline. So once you have your big, long strip of colored paper with all of your drawings on there, what you're going to do is you will then take your craft tube or toilet paper roll, and if you'll notice, there is a strip on there. That is double-sided tape. What you will do is you will take the strip off, and then that will be sticky. So you'll put a toilet paper roll at the end of each side of the super long one. And then you're going to roll it up. You're going to roll it up from both sides though, so that it goes like this. All right. And I have a rubber band around mine, but we have provided you with a lovely ribbon. It may not look like this. There's lots of different ribbons. And you can wrap that around it instead. And that way it looks more authentic, like an actual scroll. Very fancy. And then you or someone you know who's really good at tying knots can tie it up. And then you have your gigantic timeline. Now, I know that a couple of you are going to be like, looking at that picture that I gave you, and you're going to be like, why is the woolly mammoth before the dinosaurs? That's because these are just generic pictures of mammals, and the same thing for the snakes and the reptiles and all that jazz. So there's different debates on when the first mammals, what we're considering a mammal, shows up. So under these pictures, I have put the time of when these first things showed up. So like the first fish showed up about 500 million years ago. And the first reptiles, they don't look like the reptiles we have today for the most part. They looked different, but they are the great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers of our current day reptiles. Showed up about 370 million years ago, excuse me. And this is where it gets a little funky, because mammals and dinosaurs actually showed up around the same time. So officially, the first dinosaur showed up about 230 million years ago. But the first warm-blooded creature, which is like the thing that makes something a mammal, it's the biggest trait, showed up 260 million years ago. It's not technically what we think of as a mammal, but it is that major evolutionary change of having warm blood. So that's why I put them before the dinosaurs. Depending on who you talk to, they might switch that order. But now, humans, I had to give a range. Humans showed up about 200 to 50,000 years ago. Again, it just depends on what you're considering, quote unquote, a human. So like cavemen, Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon man, archaic humans, modern humans. There's a lot of different debates. If you're really curious and you want to figure it out, please do the research. And then you tell me what you think, because I spent a while trying to figure out if there was a definite year, and it just depends. Okay? But it's crazy to think about how long that timeline is. And all of the creatures, the animals and people, get all squished at the bottom, because we're relatively new on a geologic scale. So I hope you guys had fun, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!